The notification popped up on my phone at 3:42 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon while I was reviewing portfolio statements in my corner office. Sarah had posted another LinkedIn update, this time featuring a professional photo of herself at a tech conference podium with the caption that would change everything between us. I read the post 3 times before taking a screenshot. 2,847 likes and climbing. Comments flooding in from industry professionals, family, friends, and networking connections, all praising Sarah's insights about entrepreneurial success while agreeing that some people just don't have what it takes. What none of those commenters knew was that Sarah's tech empire, the company she'd built her reputation on, the startup that had launched her speaking career, the business that funded her luxury lifestyle, existed entirely because of funding from the sister she was publicly humiliating. The relationship between Sarah's success and my money had started 3 years earlier, though she'd never made the connection. Her original business plan had been brilliant but underfunded. Traditional investors had passed, banks had declined her loan applications, and crowdfunding had raised less than 10% of her target. That's when Meridian Capital Partners, one of my shell companies, had approached her with an offer. $50 million in series of funding with remarkably favorable terms. No board seats required, minimal reporting obligations, and complete operational freedom. Sarah had been so grateful for the miracle investor that she'd never bothered to investigate who actually owned Meridian Capital Partners. For 3 years, I'd watched my sister build her tech empire on my money while treating me like the family disappointment at every gathering. She genuinely believed her success was entirely self-made, her funding had come from smart networking, and her achievements proved she was the successful sibling while I was the one who never learned how to build anything meaningful. The irony had been educational until today. This LinkedIn post crossed a line from private family dynamics into public professional humiliation. Sarah had decided to use my supposed failures as content for her personal brand, and 2,847 people had validated her narrative. I opened my contact list and called David Morrison, my primary financial advisor. "Emma, good to hear from you. How can I help? I need to discuss the Meridian Capital position in TechFlow Solutions." "Sarah's company? The $50 million investment? What are you thinking?" "Complete withdrawal. I want every dollar pulled out by market close tomorrow." There was a long pause. "Emma, that's essentially their entire funding base. Without Meridian's investment, TechFlow is looking at immediate insolvency." "I understand the implications. This will destroy the company. 200 employees, dozens of client contracts, years of development work. Are you certain this is what you want?" I looked at my phone screen, where Sarah's post now had 3,156 likes and comments like, "So true. Some people never figure out how to create real value, and your sister should learn from your example instead of making excuses." "I'm certain. Begin the withdrawal process immediately. I'll need to review the investment agreements, but given the structure we used, I believe we can exercise the emergency liquidation clause. Should I prepare a statement for the other investors?" "What other investors?" "Right. Meridian is the sole funding source. This will be dramatic." David handled the technical details while I finished my day at the consulting firm where I maintain my cover as a mid-level business analyst. My colleagues had no idea that their quiet, unassuming coworker controlled investment portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The beauty of the Meridian Capital structure was its complete anonymity. Sarah knew she'd received funding from a private investment firm, but the actual ownership was buried beneath layers of legal entities that made tracing nearly impossible. She'd built her entire empire on money from the sister she publicly mocked, and she'd never suspected the truth. That evening, I drove to Sarah's penthouse apartment in my modest Toyota Camry, the same car she loved to point out whenever family discussions turned to who was doing well in life. Her building's parking garage was filled with luxury vehicles, including her Tesla Model S that she'd purchased with what she believed were profits from smart business decisions. Sarah's apartment was everything mine wasn't: floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, art pieces worth more than most people's annual salaries. All of it funded through distributions from Meridian Capital Partners, which she thought were investor dividends from successful company performance. "Emma, this is a surprise," Sarah said, opening her door with the kind of smile that suggested she was already planning to turn my visit into social media content. What brings you to the successful side of town? I saw your LinkedIn post today. Oh, it's doing incredibly well. Over 3,000 likes so far. I think it really resonated with people about the importance of persistence and vision. It was certainly revealing. Sarah gestured toward her living room, where her laptop was open to analytics dashboards showing TechFlow's performance metrics. The company was indeed performing well, growing rapidly, expanding into new markets, building a strong reputation in the tech industry. I've been meaning to talk to you about goal setting, she continued, settling onto her designer sofa. I know you've been struggling to find direction, and I think I could help you develop a more strategic mindset. Strategic mindset? Thinking bigger picture. Instead of just getting by with your consulting work, maybe consider what you could build if you really applied yourself. I looked around the apartment that existed because of my money while listening to my sister explain how I could improve my life by becoming more like her. The cognitive dissonance was remarkable. Take TechFlow for example, she continued. 3 years ago it was just an idea. But through networking, persistence, and really understanding what investors want to see, I was able to secure the funding to make it happen. How much funding? 50 million Series A. Single investor actually, which is unusual but worked perfectly. Meridian Capital Partners, they're a private firm that specializes in tech startups with high growth potential. Do you know much about them? Sarah shrugged. Not really. They're very hands-off, which I appreciate. Some investors want constant updates and board seats and all that micromanagement stuff. Meridian just provides capital and lets entrepreneurs do what they do best. That does sound ideal. It is. And it's proof that when you have a solid business plan and the confidence to pursue it, the right opportunities will find you. That's what I meant in my LinkedIn post about some people just never learning. Success isn't complicated, you just have to be willing to take risks and think beyond small-scale consulting work. Friday morning brought a busy day of meetings with attorneys and financial advisors. The process of withdrawing $50 million from a company required careful coordination to minimize legal exposure while ensuring complete fund recovery. The withdrawal will trigger immediate cash flow crisis, David explained during our morning meeting. TechFlow's burn rate is approximately $4.2 million per month. Without Meridian funding, they have maybe 3 weeks of operating capital. What about their revenue? Growing but not sufficient to support current operations. They've been scaling aggressively based on expected continued investment. Classic startup model, grow fast, worry about profitability later. And Sarah's personal financial situation? Also tied to company performance. Her salary, bonuses, stock options, everything depends on TechFlow remaining viable. If the company collapses, she loses everything. The withdrawal process began at market open. By noon, TechFlow's bank accounts would show a $50 million outflow with no corresponding asset transfer or explanation. By afternoon, Sarah would receive notification that her primary investor had exercised their liquidation rights and terminated all funding agreements. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Sarah had been posting Instagram stories throughout the morning, photos of her corner office, screenshots of positive client feedback, inspirational quotes about entrepreneurship and persistence. At 12:47 p.m. the post stopped. At 1:15 p.m. my phone rang. Emma, something terrible has happened. Sarah's voice was shaking. Our investor pulled out. Completely. No warning, no explanation, just gone. That sounds serious. It's catastrophic. $50 million just disappeared from our accounts. Our lawyers are trying to figure out what happened, but the investment agreements apparently included some kind of emergency withdrawal clause. Why would they do that? I have no idea. Our performance has been excellent. Revenue growing, client satisfaction high, market expansion ahead of schedule. There's no logical business reason for this. I could hear Sarah crying on the other end of the line. 3 years of building her company, her reputation, her lifestyle, all of it crumbling because the investor she'd never met had decided to withdraw support. What does this mean for the company? We're basically bankrupt. Without that funding, we can't make payroll, can't pay suppliers, can't maintain our office lease. I'm looking at complete business failure within weeks. I'm so sorry, Sarah. The worst part is the timing. I just posted about success and persistence and now I'm facing total collapse. It's going to look like karma or something. The conversation continued for 20 minutes, with Sarah explaining the scope of the disaster while I made appropriate sympathetic responses. Her confidence had completely disappeared, replaced by panic about losing everything she'd built. "The thing I keep thinking about," she said, "is that LinkedIn post yesterday. Here I was talking about success and how some people never learn, and now I'm the one losing everything." The post was pretty harsh. "I know. I was thinking about you when I wrote it, actually. About how you've been doing the same consulting work for years without really building anything bigger. But now, maybe there's something to be said for stability over growth. Maybe. I mean, you're not going to lose your job because your investor disappeared. You're not facing bankruptcy and public failure and having to explain to 200 employees why they're being laid off." The irony was perfect, but explaining it would serve no useful purpose. Sarah was learning the difference between success built on solid foundations and success built on borrowed capital, even if she didn't know the capital had been borrowed from the sister she'd publicly humiliated. Over the weekend, Sarah's LinkedIn post took on new significance as news of TechFlow's collapse spread through industry networks. The same people who had liked her insights about success and persistence were now commenting with sympathy about her unexpected investor betrayal. "So sorry to hear about TechFlow," read one comment. "Just goes to show how quickly things can change in the startup world. Your post about persistence feels even more relevant now," added another. "Hope you can find a way to rebuild." Sarah's response was gracious but revealed her complete bewilderment. "Thank you for the support. Sometimes success isn't just about what you build, it's about factors beyond your control. Learning to be humble about both victories and setbacks." Monday brought more conversations with Sarah as she navigated the practical aspects of business closure. The 200 employees would be laid off by Wednesday. Client contracts would be terminated with penalty payments she couldn't afford. The office lease would default, the equipment would be repossessed, and her personal guarantees on various business loans would trigger bankruptcy proceedings. "I keep trying to understand what went wrong," she told me during our Tuesday phone call. "Our business model was sound, our execution was excellent, our growth metrics were industry-leading. The only variable was investor confidence, and I have no idea what changed. Maybe they needed liquidity for other investments? Maybe. But the timing feels almost personal. Like someone wanted to watch us fail. That seems unlikely. Investors want returns, not revenge." "You're probably right. It's just 3 years of my life gone overnight. My reputation, my team, my financial security. All dependent on someone else's decision that I had no control over." The following week, industry publications ran stories about TechFlow's collapse, focusing on the cautionary tale of startup dependence on single investors. Sarah was interviewed for several articles, where she emphasized the importance of diversified funding and the risks of anonymous investor relationships. "The hardest lesson," she told TechCrunch, "is that success without sustainable foundations is just an illusion. We built something remarkable, but it was built on someone else's money and someone else's confidence. When that disappeared, everything disappeared." The interviewer asked about her plans for the future. "I'm taking time to reassess. Maybe looking at more stable opportunities, building something that doesn't depend on external funding or investor whims." "Any interest in consulting work?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Actually, yes. My sister works as a business consultant and I used to think that was small-time thinking. Now I'm realizing there's real value in work that you control, that doesn't depend on other people's continued support." 3 months later, Sarah called with an update. "I've been doing some freelance consulting work," she said. "Nothing dramatic, just helping small businesses with strategic planning and process improvement." "How's that going?" "Better than expected. The pay is decent, the work is interesting, and most importantly, it's mine. No investors to please, no funding to worry about, no risk of someone pulling the rug out from under me." "That sounds sustainable." "It is. And Emma, I owe you an apology. That LinkedIn post about success running in our family except for you, that was unfair and mean-spirited. You've been doing steady, reliable work for years, building real skills and genuine value. I was so caught up in the glamour of my startup success that I forgot the importance of substance over flash. I appreciate you saying that. The truth is, you've been more successful than me this whole time. You built a career that couldn't be destroyed by someone else's whims. That's real security, real achievement." 6 months after TechFlow's collapse, Sarah had established herself as an independent business consultant specializing in sustainable growth strategies. Her LinkedIn posts now emphasized the importance of building businesses that could survive without external funding, learning from failure, and maintaining humility about success. The transformation was remarkable. The sister who had publicly mocked my small-time thinking was now advocating for exactly the kind of stable, self-reliant approach I'd always taken. We met for coffee on the anniversary of her LinkedIn post that had started everything. "I've been thinking about that post a lot," she said, stirring her latte. "About success and learning and what it means to really achieve something meaningful. What conclusions have you reached?" "That I was completely wrong about almost everything. Success isn't about how much funding you can raise or how fast you can scale. It's about building something that lasts, something that serves people, something that exists because of your effort rather than someone else's money." Those are hard lessons to learn. They are. And I learned them the expensive way. But maybe that's what I needed, to lose everything in order to understand what actually matters. I thought about the $50 million that had funded Sarah's empire and was now supporting scholarships for women entrepreneurs. Her failure had become opportunities for other people to build sustainable businesses without depending on anonymous investors who might disappear without warning. "The strangest part," Sarah continued, "is that I still don't know who Meridian Capital Partners really was. My lawyers tried to trace the ownership, but it's buried under so many legal structures that finding the actual person behind the investment is basically impossible. Does it matter who they were? I guess not. Maybe they were just business people who saw better opportunities elsewhere. Maybe they needed liquidity for personal reasons. Maybe they lost confidence in the tech sector. Maybe they didn't appreciate being taken for granted." Sarah looked at me curiously. "What do you mean?" "Nothing specific. Just that investor relationships are still relationships. If someone provides capital that enables your success, maybe acknowledging that contribution matters more than most entrepreneurs realize. You might be right. I probably should have made more effort to understand and appreciate whoever was funding my company. Instead, I just took the money and assumed it would always be there." We finished our coffee while Sarah continued reflecting on lessons learned and opportunities gained through failure. She genuinely seemed happier as an independent consultant than she had been as a funded startup CEO. Walking to our cars, Sarah stopped and turned to face me. "Emma, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Do you think I'm a better person now than I was a year ago?" "I think you're more authentic now. More grounded. More aware of what you can control versus what you can't." That's what I hoped. The arrogance, the assumption that I had all the answers, the way I treated other people's choices as inferior to mine, all of that needed to go. Growth often requires losing things we thought we needed. Exactly. And sometimes the things we lose weren't really ours to begin with. Driving home, I reflected on the strange journey from Sarah's cruel LinkedIn post to her genuine transformation. My decision to withdraw funding had been motivated by frustration with her public humiliation, but the outcome had been more constructive than I'd expected. Sarah had learned humility, built real skills, and discovered the satisfaction of self-reliant success. Her collapse had forced her to develop authentic expertise rather than depending on borrowed capital and borrowed confidence. The $50 million was being put to better use funding women entrepreneurs who understood the value of sustainable business practices. Sarah's failure had become a foundation for other people's genuine success. Sometimes the most valuable education comes from losing everything you thought you wanted and discovering what you actually needed. Sarah had learned the difference between success and the appearance of success, between achievement and the illusion of achievement. And I had learned that the most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. Sarah's LinkedIn post about family success had been cruel, but her journey from funded entrepreneur to independent consultant had ultimately validated the steady, sustainable approach she'd once mocked. The sister who had publicly dismissed my small-time thinking was now building exactly the kind of modest, reliable business she'd once considered beneath her. Sometimes the best way to prove your point is to let other people discover it for themselves, even if the discovery requires losing everything they thought they wanted first.
"Get out. My son deserves better than you," Martha shouted, pushing me out onto the cold porch at 2 a.m. The freezing air cut through my thin pajamas. "You're 45. You can't give him children. He needs someone younger." I watched as she locked the door, her hands shaking with anger, or maybe satisfaction. Through the window, I saw my husband David, passed out on the couch, too drunk to notice. My name is Isabella. At 45, my mother-in-law just threw me out of my own home while my husband lay unconscious. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Instead, I walked to my car and made a call. "Hey, Sophie, can I stay with you for a few days? Just some house issues." As I drove, I thought about the red flags I had ignored. The secret calls, Martha's sudden interest in our fertility struggles, the young woman at their church. David and I met when I was 40 and he was 38. It was a whirlwind romance. He didn't care about the age gap, but Martha did. No matter what I did, cooking her favorite meals, helping with her charities, it was never enough. When I arrived, Sophie was already waiting. "Izzy, what happened? And don't lie." I sighed. "Martha finally did it. She kicked me out." "What? She can't do that. The house is in your name too." "Actually," I said, settling onto her couch, "it's only in my name." Sophie's jaw dropped. I opened my laptop, showing her documents, emails, bank statements, deeds. Years ago, David transferred everything to me to protect our assets during a lawsuit. Martha never knew. And that's not all. I continued, pulling up another folder. Photos showed Martha with a young woman, Jessica, 28. They were shopping, having lunch, even visiting a fertility clinic. "Martha's been preparing Jessica to replace me," I said. "She promised her my house, my cars, everything, but none of it belongs to her." Sophie shook her head. "So what's your plan?" I smiled. "First, sleep, then my lawyer." For 2 days, I stayed quiet. I ignored David's calls and Martha's texts. My lawyer worked fast. "Your security footage proves Martha broke into your office," he said. "With a conspiracy to steal your assets, we have a case." "And the restraining order?" I asked. "Ready to be filed. Neither Martha nor Jessica will be allowed near your properties." On the third day, I made my move. First, the police removed Martha and Jessica from my house. Then they were served restraining orders. Finally, I changed the locks, this time with a high-tech security system. Later, David showed up, confused. "Izzy, what's going on? Mom said you left me for another man." Then the police came. I slid a folder toward him. "Your mother lied. She threw me out and tried to move your girlfriend in." "Yes, I know about Jessica, the fertility clinic, everything." David's face went pale. "Wait, the house, the cars, they're all in your name." "Everything," I said. "And now your mother is facing criminal charges." "But she was just trying to help me," he mumbled. I laughed. "Help? By destroying our marriage? By plotting with another woman? That's not help, David. That's manipulation." Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Martha. "Please, we need to talk. I didn't know. Please don't do this." I showed it to David. "Your mother made her choice. Now, what's yours?" David sat across from me, looking shocked and confused. He ran his hands through his graying hair. "I never meant for this to happen," he said. "Mom kept saying we needed a fresh start, that you were holding me back." "And Jessica?" I asked quietly. "Was she part of this fresh start?" David flinched. "Nothing happened. Mom introduced us at church, kept inviting her over when you were working late. She said Jessica reminded her of herself when she was young." I turned my laptop toward him. "Nothing happened." "Then explain this." On a screen, Martha and Jessica were in my office, trying on my jewelry, looking through my files. "They were in our house, David, planning their future with my things while you were passed out drunk." His face crumpled. "I didn't know. I swear, Izzy." I took a deep breath. "Your mother kicks me out at 2 a.m., moves in a younger woman, and you thought that was okay." Before he could answer, my phone buzzed again. More messages from Martha. "I was just trying to protect my son. Please don't destroy our family. The police said I could go to jail. You wouldn't do that to David's mother, would you?" I showed them to David. "She still thinks she can manipulate her way out of this." David looked lost. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to make a choice," I said. "Not your mother's, not Jessica's. Yours." The doorbell rang. I checked the security camera. Martha stood on the porch, her mascara running. Jessica stood behind her, looking scared. "They're breaking the restraining order," I said, picking up my phone. "Wait," David said, touching my hand. Let me talk to them first. I study his face. For the first time in months, he looked clear-headed. 5 minutes, I said. And they stay outside. David stepped onto the porch and shut the door behind him. I watched through the security camera. Martha reached for him, but he stepped back. How could you do this, Mom? He asked. You broke into our house. You went through Izzy's things. I did it for you, Martha cried. She's too old for you, David. She can't give you children. Jessica is young, fertile. Stop it, David snapped. You didn't do this for me. You did it for yourself. You never accepted my marriage, and now you've gone too far. Jessica spoke up. David, your mom said you loved me, that you were just waiting for the right time to leave her. David shook his head. I never said that. Mom, you told me Jessica was just a friend. But you were planning to ruin my marriage. Martha's face hardened. She'll send me to jail. Your own mother. How can you let her do this? You did this to yourself, David said quietly. Breaking into our home, trying to steal from Izzy. Those were your choices. Martha's face fell. Jessica was already backing away, realizing she wasn't getting my house after all. David, please, Martha begged. Tell her to drop the charges. No, Mom, he said firmly. I won't ask her to do that. You need to leave. Now, before I call the police myself. I watched as they left. I felt relief, sadness, and something close to pride. David had finally stood up to his mother. When he came back inside, his eyes were red, but his shoulders were straight. I'm so sorry, Izzy, he said. I've been a fool. Yes, you have, I said, but gently. What happens now? He sighed. I need help. I've been drinking too much, letting Mom control me. I don't want to lose you, but I understand if it's too late. I sat beside him, close but not touching. It's not too late, but things have to change. Your mother has to face the consequences. You need help for your drinking. And we need counseling. A lot of it. Anything, he said. I'll do anything to fix this. Just then, my phone buzzed again. A message from Martha. You've turned my son against me. I will never forgive you for this. I showed it to David. He sighed. She still doesn't get it. But I do. I choose you, Izzy. I choose us. As the security system beeped, showing Martha's car leaving the street, David squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. Sometimes everything has to fall apart before you can build something stronger. 6 months passed like seasons changing, each day bringing small but significant transformations. David kept his promise, attending AA meetings 3 times a week and counseling sessions twice a month. I went with him to couples therapy, where we slowly rebuilt the trust that had been fractured. Martha faced the consequences of her actions. The court showed leniency due to her age and David's plea, sentencing her to 2 years probation and mandatory counseling. She was also ordered to pay substantial restitution for the items she damaged in my office during her break-ins. Jessica disappeared from our lives completely. Last I heard, she'd moved to another state, perhaps finally understanding that she'd been a pawn in Martha's game. One crisp autumn evening, as David and I sat on our back porch watching the sunset, he turned to me with clear, sober eyes. You know what I realized today? It's been exactly 6 months since that night. I nodded, sipping my tea. The memory of that cold midnight eviction no longer stung like it used to. A lot has changed. Mom called again, he said quietly. She wants to apologize in person. Says her counselor thinks it's important for her healing process. I considered this for a moment. And what do you think? I think, he said slowly, that for the first time in her life, she's actually doing the work. But I also think it's your decision. She hurt you more than anyone. His words warmed me more than the tea. 6 months ago, he would have pressured me to forgive and forget, to keep the peace. Now he understood the importance of boundaries. We can meet at a neutral place, I suggested. That little cafe downtown, perhaps. 2 days later, I sat across from Martha in the sunny cafe. She looked different, smaller somehow, less imposing. The perfectly coiffed hair and designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple sweater and minimal makeup. Thank you for agreeing to see me, she began, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. My counselor wanted me to tell you how sorry I am, but that feels inadequate. It is, I agreed calmly. She flinched but continued. I was wrong, not just about what I did, but about everything. I thought I was protecting David, but I was only protecting my own ego. Seeing him so happy with someone who didn't need my guidance, it made me feel obsolete. You're his mother, Martha. You could never be obsolete unless you choose to be. Tears welled in her eyes. I chose wrong. I let my pride and prejudice blind me. Watching David these past months, he's happier, healthier. He finally grew into the man he was meant to be, and it happened when I stepped back, not when I tried to control everything. I stirred my tea thoughtfully. You know this doesn't fix everything, right? Trust has to be rebuilt. Boundaries have to be respected. I know, she nodded. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I'm just asking for a chance to prove I can change. As I drove home later, I thought about change and redemption. Martha's actions had nearly destroyed our family, but they'd also forced us to confront long-standing issues. David found sobriety and independence. I found my voice and strength. Even Martha was finally facing her own demons. David was waiting when I got home, trying not to look anxious. How did it go? I hung up my coat, considering my answer. Better than I expected. She's different, more genuine. Time will tell if it lasts. He pulled me into a hug, and I relaxed against him. Thank you, he whispered into my hair, for not giving up on us, for being stronger than all of us. That night, as we lay in bed, David already asleep beside me, I remembered standing in the cold 6 months ago, wondering if our marriage was over. Instead, it had been a beginning, the start of something stronger, more honest, more real. My phone lit up with a text from Martha. Thank you for today. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm trying. I hope someday you can trust me again. I typed back a simple response, one day at a time. It was what David always said at his AA meetings, and it felt right for this situation too. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen, one choice, one day, one moment at a time. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the ace I'd had up my sleeve that night, not just the legal documents or the surveillance footage, but the strength to stand up for myself, to demand better, to allow consequences to unfold naturally. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's giving people the space to face their own actions and grow from them. And sometimes, like a garden after a storm, what grows back is stronger than what was there before. Just leave, Olivia. No need for lawyers or paperwork, Marcus said, watching me pack. Downstairs, his young girlfriend, Hannah, laughed as she rearranged my furniture. I stayed calm as I folded my clothes. Are you sure? No legal separation, no formal divorce. Marcus leaned against the door, arms crossed. What's the point? You have your job, I have mine. Hannah and I want a fresh start. Lawyers will just make things messy. I'm Olivia Parker, 42. I thought my marriage was fine minus 15 years, a nice house, a stable life. But life has surprises, sometimes in the form of betrayal. Marcus glanced at his expensive watch, the one I bought him for our 10th anniversary. You're not in a position to demand anything. The house and cars are in my name. Your government job pays enough. You'll be fine. That government job. If only he knew. I zipped up my suitcase, taking one last look around. Hannah's perfume filled the room. Her bag was on my side of the bed. You're taking this well, Marcus said, expecting me to cry or beg. I smiled, remembering how I found out about his affair, not through text or lipstick stains, but in a much more interesting way. I've learned to pick my battles, Marcus, I said, but I'm surprised you don't want legal proof of our separation. He shrugged. Why bother? You move out, Hannah moves in. Life goes on. No paper trail. That almost made me laugh. Downstairs, Hannah was already replacing my things. She barely looked up as I walked past. I left some things in the study. I'll be back tomorrow, I said. Whatever. Just text first, Marcus replied, already focused on Hannah. I loaded my suitcase into my car and glanced back. Through the window, Marcus and Hannah were laughing, wrapped up in their new life. I pulled out my phone and sent a text. Everything ready for tomorrow. Target confirmed, no legal documentation. Proceeding as planned. The reply was instant. Understood. Team briefed. 9 a.m. sharp. I took a last look at the house Marcus thought was his. He had no idea what was coming. He never questioned my job, never wondered why I handled all our finances, never noticed how his investment portfolio always did better than others. As I drove, my phone buzzed again. Additional evidence collected. Operation confirmed. Tomorrow, Marcus would finally understand what my job really was. He would learn that his wife, the woman he betrayed, was actually protecting him all these years. But not anymore. At exactly 9 a.m., Justice would arrive at his door, wearing a bulletproof vest and carrying a federal warrant. The next morning, I sat in an FBI surveillance van, sipping coffee while watching live camera feeds of my old house. Marcus's routine was always the same. 7:45 a.m., kitchen lights on. Hannah trying to cook his favorite breakfast. 8:15 a.m., Marcus showering, then fixing his hair. 8:45 a.m., adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. Target is getting ready to leave, Agent Torres said. All teams in position. A chorus of voices confirmed. You okay? Torres asked. She knew this was personal for me. Better than okay, I said, watching Hannah kiss Marcus goodbye. Feels strange being on this side of the operation. For 3 years, I had gathered evidence against Marcus's investment firm. What started as a simple investigation uncovered fraud, money laundering, and serious financial crimes. No wonder Marcus didn't want legal paperwork between us. He was hiding more than just an affair. At 8:55 a.m., Marcus stepped outside, briefcase in hand, still smug, still thinking he was untouchable. He checked his reflection in his car window, straightening a silk tie paid for with dirty money. All teams ready, Torres ordered. Remember, he isn't violent but may try to destroy evidence. Marcus got into his Mercedes, the car he bought in only his name. For tax reasons, he once said. Now I knew the truth. It was harder to seize assets he owned alone. Target is moving, Torres announced. Team 1, go to the house. Team 2, prepare to intercept at his office. I focused on Hannah, still inside, cleaning up breakfast. She had no idea her dream life was about to crumble. 9 o'clock a.m. sharp, FBI agents surrounded the house. The doorbell rang. Hannah, wearing my old robe, opened the door, confused. FBI. We have a search warrant. Her confusion turned to panic. What? This has to be a mistake. No mistake, ma'am. Step aside. On another screen, Marcus was halfway to his office when flashing police lights appeared behind him. His car slowed, pulling over. Target has stopped, an agent confirmed. Moving in. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. What did you do? I didn't reply. Instead, I watched as agents approached, guns ready, just in case. Marcus stepped out, hands raised. His expensive suit suddenly didn't seem so powerful. Back at the house, Hannah sat crying on the couch as agents searched every corner. They knew exactly where to look. I had given them every detail. We found the first stash, an agent reported. Hidden safe in the study. Just like Agent Parker said. I smiled. Marcus had always praised my organization skills. He never realized I was using them against him. Torres turned to me. You knew about his crimes this whole time? I nodded. Discovered them 3 years ago. Started collecting evidence immediately. He never thought I was smart enough to understand his work, so he didn't bother hiding it. And the mistress. Found out about Hannah 3 months ago. She wasn't the first, but she was the last straw. My phone buzzed again. Marcus's lawyer this time. We need to talk. Now. Of course they wanted to talk. They were just realizing the truth. No shared accounts, no assets in my name, no divorce papers. It wasn't to protect Marcus. It was to make it easier for the FBI to take everything. On the screen, Hannah was being led out of the house, sobbing. She had thought she was gaining a perfect life. Instead, she was about to be questioned as a witness in a federal case. Target is secure. Moving to Phase 2, an agent said. Phase 2, raiding Marcus's office. His colleagues would soon discover that their star investment banker was actually a fraud. His clients would learn their high returns were all lies. Marcus? He was about to learn that the wife he underestimated had been watching and preparing for this moment all along. One more text came in, this time from Hannah. Did you know about this? I finally replied, yes. Now you know why Marcus didn't want a paper trail between us. Torres patted my shoulder. Ready to head to the office. They need you for the evidence analysis. I stood adjusting my FBI jacket. Let's go. Time to show them what a government job really looks like. 6 months later, I sat in the federal courthouse, watching Marcus enter in his orange jumpsuit. Gone was the expensive suit, the confident strut, the smug smile. The evidence I'd gathered over 3 years had proven devastating, not just for him, but for the entire firm. Hannah had turned state's witness almost immediately, desperate to avoid any charges herself. She provided additional details about conversations she'd overheard, meetings she'd witnessed, proving herself surprisingly useful to the prosecution. All rise. As the judge entered, I caught Marcus's eye. For the first time since his arrest, he looked directly at me. I saw the questions there, the confusion, the slow realization of just how completely he'd underestimated me. The sentencing was brief but impactful. 15 years, one for each year of our marriage. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The judge was particularly harsh, citing Marcus's blatant disregard for his client's financial security and his persistent pattern of deception. After the proceedings, I stepped into the courthouse hallway where Agent Torres waited. 15 years, she said, handing me a coffee, plus full asset forfeiture. The restitution team has already begun returning funds to the defrauded clients. I nodded, thinking about the house. Our house, now seized and pending auction. Hannah had moved back in with her parents, her dreams of being a wealthy man's wife shattered along with her reputation. Agent Parker. I turned to find Marcus's lawyer approaching. Your ex-husband would like to speak with you, if you're willing. I considered refusing, but curiosity won out. Minutes later, I sat across from Marcus in a small conference room, guards posted outside. Why didn't you tell me? He asked immediately. All those years, you knew what I was doing. You could have warned me. I laughed softly. I did warn you, Marcus. Remember all those times I questioned your investment strategies, suggested more transparent reporting. You always dismissed me, said I couldn't understand the complexities of your work. He winced, remembering. I never thought. Your government job. No, you never did think about my job, did you? Never asked why I actually did, never showed any interest. You just assumed I was some minor bureaucrat pushing papers. When did you know? About everything. 3 years ago. That big client win you celebrated. The offshore accounts. That was when I started building the case. I could have arrested you then, but I wanted to understand the full scope of the operation. He leaned back, realization dawning. And Hannah? She made my decision easier, showed me it was time to stop protecting you. A guard signaled our time was ending. As I stood to leave, Marcus spoke again, his voice smaller than I ever heard it. I'm sorry, Olivia, not just for Hannah, for everything. I paused at the door. I know, but sometimes sorry isn't enough. Outside, spring was arriving in the city. I walked with Torres to our office, where a new case waited. Life was different now, but better. No more hiding, no more pretending, no more protecting someone who'd never valued me. The team's taking me out tonight, Torres said as we reached our building. To celebrate the conviction, you should come. I smiled, checking my phone. A text from my sister about dinner plans next week, another from a friend about a weekend hiking trip. My life had expanded since Marcus's arrest, filled with people and possibilities I'd forgotten existed. Count me in, I replied. Later that evening, surrounded by colleagues who'd become friends, I raised a glass to new beginnings. Someone asked if I regretted not turning Marcus in sooner. No, I said honestly. Everything happened exactly when it needed to. And it had. Marcus's arrest had exposed not just his crimes, but a larger network of financial fraud. The case had earned me a promotion, respect from colleagues who'd worked the investigation without knowing my personal connection, and most importantly, my freedom. The house would be sold, the assets distributed to victims, and Marcus would have plenty of time to think about his choices. Hannah had learned a hard lesson about trust and ambition. Though I heard she'd enrolled in community college, perhaps something good would come of it all. As for me, I was exactly where I needed to be. My government job had become a source of pride, my colleagues a source of strength, and my future, well, that was looking brighter than ever. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about standing back and letting justice take its course. And sometimes it's about showing everyone, including yourself, exactly who you've been all along. The next morning, I walked into my office, new case files waiting on my desk. Another financial fraud investigation, another chance to protect people from those who would exploit them. I smiled, thinking of Marcus's words, no need for legal papers. He'd been right about that, just not in the way he'd imagined. We hadn't needed divorce papers after all. Federal indictments had worked just fine. Marcus packed his fancy shirts into a suitcase, barely glancing at me. "The kids will understand," he said. "They'll love Amanda. She's great with children." I stood in the doorway, watching the man I had been married to for 15 years pack up his life. His words made my stomach turn, but I kept my face calm. "They're only 8 and 10, Marcus. They barely know her." He shrugged, carefully placing his expensive watches into a case. "Kids adapt. Besides, they'll have to. We're moving in together next week. My name is Emma. I'm 38 years old, and my husband was leaving me and our kids for his 26-year-old yoga instructor." But I wasn't crying. I wasn't begging him to stay. Instead, I was thinking about the phone call I got yesterday from our family lawyer. "And the divorce?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "When are you filing?" Marcus smirked. "No need for all that, Em. Amanda and I think we should keep things simple. No lawyers, no splitting money. Let's just move on." Of course he wanted that, because he didn't know about my father's trust fund. He had no idea that his plans were about to fall apart. "Whatever you think is best," I said, watching him zip up his bags. He paused at the doorway, eyeing me suspiciously. "You're taking this better than I expected." I smiled, thinking about the bank statement arriving tomorrow. I've learned to adapt. 12 hours earlier, I had sat in Mr. Thompson's office, our lawyer, as he explained something that changed everything. "Your father was a smart man, Emma," he said, pulling out a thick folder. "Before he passed, he created a trust fund for you and your children, with some very special rules." I remember my father's words before he died. "Always have a backup plan, Emma. Always be 3 steps ahead." The trust fund becomes active if your husband tries to abandon his financial responsibilities to your children. Mr. Thompson explained. "Your father wanted to make sure his grandchildren were protected." I thought about how Marcus always controlled our money, how he gave me an allowance while he spent freely on himself. "And Marcus doesn't know about this?" I asked. Mr. Thompson smiled. "Your father was clear. Marcus was never supposed to know unless he triggered the conditions. And since he's been emptying accounts and trying to sell property without your consent, it's time." Now, I watched Marcus load his bags into his shiny sports car, completely unaware that by tomorrow, his bank accounts would be frozen. "I'll call you about seeing the kids," he said, closing the trunk. "Once Amanda and I are settled." Upstairs, our children, Lily and James, watched their father leave. Lily pressed her small hand against the window, confused and hurt. James stood behind her, his face angry. No 10-year-old should have to feel that. "Take care, Marcus," I said softly. He drove away without looking back. He thought he was heading toward a perfect new life. But by tomorrow morning, the money he'd been secretly using to pay for Amanda's luxury apartment would be gone. I walked back inside and climbed the stairs to my children's rooms. They needed me now more than ever. But I wasn't worried about our future. My father had made sure we would be okay. Lily looked up at me, tears in her eyes. Is Daddy really going to live with his friend now? I sat on her bed, pulling both her and James close. "Yes, sweetie. But we're going to be okay. Better than okay." "How do you know?" James asked, trying to sound tough. I thought about the trust fund, about everything my father had planned to protect us. I thought about Marcus's face when he realized he had lost everything. "Because your grandpa made sure of it," I said, hugging them tighter. "And tomorrow, Daddy is going to learn what happens when someone forgets what really matters." That night, as my children slept, I sat in my office, getting ready for what came next. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Amanda thinks we should take the kids to Disneyland next month. Show them how fun their new life can be." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my email. Mr. Thompson had sent me tomorrow's schedule. While Marcus dreamed about vacations, a team of financial experts was already tracking every bad decision he had made. The kids would be okay. I would make sure of it. And as for Marcus, he was about to learn that some choices have consequences. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7:15 a.m. Marcus's name flashed on the screen, but I ignored it. By the 4th call, I could imagine his panic. His credit cards weren't working, his bank accounts were locked, and all his secrets were coming out. I was making breakfast for the kids when the front door burst open. Marcus stormed in, his face red with anger. "What did you do?" he shouted, waving his phone. Every account is frozen, even my personal ones. Lily stopped eating her pancakes. James gripped his fork tightly. I stayed calm, pouring more orange juice. Kids, why don't you eat in the playroom? Mom needs to talk to Dad. Once they were gone, I turned to Marcus. Rough morning. Fix this, he demanded. Amanda and I were supposed to put a deposit on our new house today. The realtor is waiting. I leaned against the counter, remembering how he had always brushed off my concerns about money. I'm not the one you need to talk to. Our lawyer, Mr. Thompson, is handling everything now. What does that old fossil have to do with this? The doorbell rang. Perfect timing. I opened it to find Mr. Thompson, looking sharp in his charcoal suit, holding a thick folder. Mrs. Sullivan, he greeted me. And Mr. Sullivan, good. This saves me a phone call. Marcus frowned. What's going on? Please have a seat, Mr. Thompson said, placing his briefcase on the table. We have a lot to discuss about your financial decisions. My finances are none of your business, Marcus snapped. Actually, Mr. Thompson said, opening his folder, they became my business the moment you violated the rules of the Sullivan Family Trust. Marcus's face turned pale. What trust? The one Emma's father created before he passed away. It has been watching your financial activities for the past 15 years, Mr. Thompson explained, and it activates when a spouse tries to abandon their financial responsibilities to the children. Marcus dropped into a chair, his confidence fading. That's impossible. I would have known. Would you? I asked. You always told me not to worry about complicated money stuff. You never even read the documents. Mr. Thompson pulled out some papers. Let's review your actions. Last month, you emptied 3 joint accounts. You tried to sell properties that belonged to the trust. You made large payments to an outside party. Those were business expenses. Marcus interrupted. The rent for Amanda's apartment wasn't a business expense, I said. Neither was the car or the jewelry you bought her. Marcus's eyes widened. You knew. I knew everything, I said. My dad taught me to always be prepared. Mr. Thompson continued. The trust has rules about financial misconduct. All joint assets are frozen. Your personal accounts are under investigation. The properties you tried to sell are protected by the trust. You can't do this, Marcus muttered. We already have, Mr. Thompson replied, pulling out another document. Your actions triggered the trust's rules. All assets will be managed by the trust until your divorce is finalized. Divorce? Marcus jumped up, knocking over his chair. I told you, we were keeping this informal. That's not an option anymore, Mr. Thompson said. The trust requires a legal divorce to protect the children's interests. I heard a small sound and turned to see James and Lily peeking from the hallway. Their faces were filled with worry. Perhaps we should continue this at my office, Mr. Thompson suggested. 2 p.m. today. Your presence is required, Mr. Sullivan. Marcus really looked at me, for the first time in years. I saw fear in his eyes. Emma, we can fix this. Amanda and I will figure something out. I thought about all the times he had ignored me, controlled me, made me feel small. No, Marcus, we can't. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. After they left, Marcus, probably to explain to Amanda why their house wasn't happening, and Mr. Thompson to prepare for our meeting, I sat with my kids in the playroom. Is Dad in trouble? James asked. Dad made some bad choices, I said, pulling them close. But Grandpa made sure we'd be okay. Even though Grandpa is in heaven? Lily asked. I smiled, thinking about my father's wisdom, especially because he's in heaven. He loved us so much, he made sure we'd always be taken care of. My phone buzzed. A text from Amanda. This isn't fair. Marcus promised me that house. I blocked her number without replying. The trust fund hadn't just protected us. It had revealed who Marcus and Amanda truly were. They thought I was weak. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. 6 months passed, bringing changes I never expected. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly, backed by the trust fund's legal team. Marcus's attempts to hide assets crumbled under forensic accounting. Amanda disappeared the moment she realized there would be no luxury house, no lavish lifestyle, no easy path to wealth. I sat in Mr. Thompson's office, reviewing the final settlement papers. The trust fund hadn't just protected us. It had revealed years of Marcus's financial deceptions. Your father would be proud, Mr. Thompson said, sliding the last document across his desk. He always said you were stronger than anyone knew. I wish he could see the kids now, I replied, thinking of how well they'd adjusted. They're finally healing. The transformation in my children had been remarkable. Once the initial shock wore off, they began to thrive. James joined the school baseball team, his confidence growing with each game. Lily discovered a passion for art, filling our home with bright paintings that somehow made everything feel lighter. Marcus's weekly visits became monthly, then sporadic. His promises of Disneyland and grand adventures faded into rushed dinners and distracted conversations. The children noticed, but instead of breaking them, it made them stronger. "Mom," James said one evening after a particularly short visit with his father, "I think I understand why Grandpa made that trust thing." "Oh?" I looked up from my book, curious. He knew sometimes grown-ups make bad choices. He wanted to make sure we'd be okay anyway. Out of the mouths of babes, the doorbell rang one Sunday afternoon while we were baking cookies. Marcus stood there, looking deflated in a way I'd never seen before. Gone were the designer clothes and expensive watch. He looked ordinary. "Can we talk?" he asked. I hesitated, but the kids were upstairs. 5 minutes. He shuffled into the kitchen, eyeing the familiar space like a stranger. "Amanda's gone," he said finally, "moved to California with some tech entrepreneur." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, though we both knew I wasn't. I was stupid, Emma. I threw away everything that mattered for nothing. I thought about responding, about pointing out all the ways he'd hurt us. But what was the point? His consequences weren't my responsibility anymore. "The kids miss you," I said instead. "When you do show up." He flinched. "I know. It's hard seeing them, seeing what I gave up." "They're not a punishment, Marcus. They're your children." He nodded, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from our early days. "Your father, he was smarter than I ever gave him credit for. That trust fund, he knew, didn't he? He knew someone like me might come along. He knew people make choices," I corrected. "He just made sure those choices couldn't hurt his grandchildren." As if on cue, Lily's laughter drifted down from upstairs, followed by James's playful shout. The sound seemed to hit Marcus like a physical blow. "I'd like to do better," he said quietly. "Be better. For them." "That's your choice to make," I replied, just like all the others. After he left, I found my father's old photo on the mantel. He was smiling, one arm around me at my college graduation. He'd already been sick then, but his eyes were sharp, determined. "You were right, Dad," I whispered. "About everything." Today, a year after Marcus first walked out, our lives have found a new rhythm. The trust fund ensured we kept our home. The children's education would be secure, and we had the freedom to rebuild without fear. Marcus, he's trying in his way. Weekly dinners with the kids, showing up to James's baseball games, attending Lily's art shows. It's not the family we were, but maybe it's the family we needed to become. I've started my own business, something I'd always dreamed of but never dared pursue under Marcus's controlling influence. The children are thriving in ways that amaze me daily. James recently won his first baseball trophy, and Lily's art was featured in the school gallery. Last week, I found a letter from my father tucked away in his old desk, written days before he died, saved for when I might need it most. My dearest Emma, by the time you read this, you'll understand why I set up the trust the way I did. Not just to protect you, but to remind you of your own strength. Sometimes the best way to love someone is to make sure they have the freedom to stand on their own. You've always been stronger than you knew. Now the world will see it too. Love, Dad. I keep that letter framed in my office now, next to the children's photos and Lily's brightest paintings. It reminds me that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better. Marcus's choices didn't break us. Instead, they revealed just how unbreakable we really were. And for that, strangely enough, I'm grateful. Because in the end, my father was right. The trust fund wasn't just about money. It was about giving us the strength to choose our own path, to build something better from the ashes of what was lost. And that's exactly what we did.